When I stepped off the plane at Savannah Airport, the first thing that hit me wasn't the heat. It was the silence. No welcome signs, no familiar faces, not even a message asking if I'd landed safely. I rolled my duffel through the terminal, past couples reuniting, parents hugging kids, and soldiers getting picked up with flowers and balloons. I kept walking until I hit the curb. The car I'd arranged the day before pulled up on time, driven by a stranger with nothing to say. The drive home was 22 minutes of quiet, broken only by the sound of tires over old pavement. I stared out the window as we passed live oaks and Spanish moss, all of it looking exactly the same, but nothing about it felt familiar anymore. When we turned onto the driveway, I felt my chest tighten. The house looked untouched. Same brick columns, same white shutters, same front porch swing that creaked in the breeze. It should have felt comforting. It didn't. I rang the bell out of habit, then opened the door with the key I still had from years ago. My mother stood in the hallway, her pearl earrings catching the light. She smiled like someone greeting a guest. "I suppose duty finally allowed you a break," she said, her tone devoid of warmth, then walked toward the kitchen. I stood there for a second, in full dress uniform, boots still dusted from foreign ground. No hug, no warmth. That one thin sentence, a dismissal dressed as a welcome, stung more than the heat outside. Just that thin smile and a turned back. Inside, my father sat in his usual spot, behind the same mahogany desk, reading a financial magazine, like nothing had changed. He looked up briefly. "Didn't expect you so soon," he said, then turned the page. That was it. Ryan was on the couch, earbuds in, phone lit up in his hand. He gave me a nod, didn't even pause his scrolling. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught somewhere between my throat and my pride. I walked upstairs to my old room. It hadn't changed. Trophies, books, that faded poster on the closet door. But even here, it felt like a museum of someone I used to be. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the walls, trying to understand what had gone cold first. Them, or me. I didn't expect a parade. I didn't need confetti or speeches. But I'd earned something more than silence. Something more than feeling like a stranger, in the only home I'd ever known. That night, I lay awake, listening to the floor creak outside my door as someone walked by without stopping. I stared at the ceiling and told myself, this was temporary. I was trained to operate under pressure, but nothing prepares you for this kind of battlefield. Not the kind where people shoot. The kind where they look straight through you. The dining room looked like something out of a magazine. Polished silverware, candelabras, linen napkins, folded into precise shapes. My mother had gone all out, like we were hosting a senator, not just sitting down for dinner. The day after the burial, I sat across from Ryan, who barely glanced up from his phone. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, arms folded, lips tight. The empty chair next to him belonged to the only person who ever made these dinners bearable, Grandpa. My absence at the service hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. We didn't say grace. No one toasted or welcomed me back. Instead, the family lawyer, Mr. Green, cleared his throat and placed a leather folder on the table, like it was a loaded weapon. 6 weeks before Admiral Lewis passed, he began, he amended his will. Everyone stiffened. All assets, including the family home, investments, and the Lewis Veterans Trust, are to be transferred solely to Captain Amanda Lewis. I didn't react at first. I thought I'd misheard him. My father's glass clinked against his plate. Ryan looked up, eyes wide for the first time all evening. The silence after that sentence was louder than anything I'd heard in combat. My mother's hand hovered over her wine glass, frozen. My father turned toward me, jaw tight, voice sharp enough to cut steel. "You manipulated a dying man," he said. "You used your uniform to twist his loyalty." I blinked, unsure if I was hearing him or some ghost of his disappointment echoing through the years. "Excuse me?" I said, barely above a whisper. "You know exactly what you did," he snapped. "You knew he was vulnerable, and you used it." My chair scraped back before the entree was even served. I couldn't breathe in that room. I couldn't sit and pretend this wasn't a betrayal dressed in family clothes. No one stopped me. Not my mother. Not Ryan. Mr. Green lowered his eyes, already folding the will back into its case. As I stepped into the hallway, my gaze landed on the photograph that had hung there since I was a kid. Grandpa in full uniform, chest out, standing proud beside a naval ship. I remembered the day he gave me the compass he'd carried for decades. "You'll need this someday," he said, "when everything else points the wrong way." I didn't know what direction I was heading, but I knew I was walking away from something that could never be whole again. Behind me, voices murmured, silverware clinked. Business as usual. Outside, the summer air felt thick, but at least it was honest. I stood on the porch, gripping the banister, trying to stop my hands from shaking. It wasn't just about the money. It never was. It was about what they thought of me, what they'd probably always thought, that I wore the uniform to run from them, that I had no right to be more than the girl who left and didn't come back until it was too late. I looked up at the stars, barely visible through the Georgia haze. Grandpa had believed in me when no one else did. And now even his belief was being used against me. I climbed into my car without looking back. The engine started. The driveway fell behind, and the photo in the hallway stayed burned in my mind. This wasn't just family tension. This was war, and I hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. 3 days after the dinner, a thick white envelope showed up at my rental. No return address, just my name printed in bold. Inside was a court summons filed by Richard Lewis, my own father, accusing me of fraud and manipulating a vulnerable adult. I read it twice before the words made sense. Then I sat down on the edge of the couch and stared at the floor, the paper still in my hand. I thought I had felt betrayal at dinner. I hadn't even scratched the surface. There were charges listed. Dates. A copy of an email supposedly sent from my NATO address weeks before Grandpa died. Proceed with the will update. He won't resist. It was sent to the family lawyer's office, with my name and signature attached. I stared at the printout, feeling the blood drain from my face. I didn't send it. I was stationed in Naples, and everything I ever filed went through encrypted lines. My access was logged, double verified, and protected, or so I thought. The panic didn't come all at once. It crept in, slow and heavy, wrapping around my chest like weights I couldn't shake off. The first thing I did was call my former commanding officer. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Weller answered on the first ring. When I told him everything, he went silent for a few seconds, then said, "You're a soldier. Handle it like one." It wasn't sympathy. It was a reminder. I didn't get to fall apart. Not yet. I pulled every document I had. Deployment orders, duty logs, IP access history. I checked every entry against the date of that email. I dug deep into the server logs and remote login attempts, cross-checking every anomaly against my NATO access protocols. That's when I found the mistake. A single login attempt on the day the email was sent, tunneled through a civilian VPN. The metadata didn't match my profile, but the origin point did. Charleston, my hometown. The hairs on my arms stood up. This wasn't a random attack. This was personal, sloppy, and immediate. I filed an urgent report with NATO's cyber division. "You're a soldier," Sam Weller had reminded me. "Handle it like one." I wasn't just defending myself. I was hunting. Meanwhile, the story had already hit the local paper. Decorated officer under fire for inheritance scam. My face, in uniform, next to words like deception and disgrace. That headline broke something in me I didn't know was still whole. Because it wasn't just my father turning on me. It was the town, the neighbors. People who used to wave at me are now crossing the street, whispering, watching. I'd fought for my country, served with honor, buried friends overseas, and now I was being tried before ever stepping into a courtroom. I wanted to scream, but instead, I printed everything, labeled every file, and built a binder thick enough to slam shut like a door. I wasn't about to let a forged email erase my life's work. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one. I thought of Grandpa, how he always said to lead with facts, not fury, so I did. Step by step, quiet and focused. I stopped answering calls unless they were from my legal team or NATO. I stopped reading comments online. I stopped hoping for my father to call and say it was a mistake. He had made his choice. Now I had to make mine. And I chose to defend myself the only way I knew how, with truth, with proof, and with every ounce of strength the Navy ever taught me. I hadn't planned to go to the dinner, but skipping it felt like surrender, and I'd done enough of that. So I walked into my childhood home wearing black slacks and a blazer, no uniform, no insignia. The room was full. Old family friends, my father's colleagues, people who used to send us Christmas cards. Now they watched me like I was a case study. Plates of duck and rice sat untouched, the air thick with anticipation. My father didn't speak at first. He simply placed a small Bluetooth speaker on the table beside his glass. His eyes were cold, unwavering. "You claim fraud," he began, his voice cutting the silence. "We have the proof that you orchestrated it." Then he pressed play. The voice that came through made my stomach turn. It was mine, or it sounded like mine. Calm, cool, calculated. "Just push it through. He's not thinking straight anymore. You know this is what he would have wanted." I froze. A fork dropped somewhere down the table. My mother covered her mouth. Ryan stared, eyes wide and frozen. Every set of eyes in that room turned toward me like I'd just confessed to treason. I stood slowly. "That's not my voice," I said. Not loud, but firm enough to stop the whispers. My father didn't blink. "It's your tone. You always thought you were smarter than the rest of us." I didn't answer. I didn't argue. That wasn't the battle I came to fight. Inside, I felt something harden. Not rage. Something colder. The kind of control I learned in war zones. When everything is chaos, and you have to act anyway. I turned and walked out. Not because I was afraid. Because I needed the silence more than I needed to be right in that moment. Outside, rain hit the pavement like static. I reached my car, shut the door, and gripped the wheel. They wanted me broken. They wanted a reaction, but I wouldn't give them that. If they were going to burn my name, they'd have to watch me walk through the fire without flinching. The Admiral's cabin was tucked behind tall pines just outside Savannah. No security gate. No medals on the wall. Just a wooden screen door. And the sound of wind moving through old trees. He opened the door slowly, studying me like someone measuring more than time. "Your grandfather trusted you," he said before I could speak. "That's why he left this with me." He handed me a small drive, military grade, labeled in black ink, Echo Whisper 4. He asked me to keep it sealed until it was needed, the Admiral said. "I think now qualifies." We sat at his kitchen table while the file loaded. The screen blinked, and there he was, Grandpa, propped up in a hospital bed. Frail, but clear-eyed. His voice was steady, despite the oxygen tube at his side. "The Lewis Fund, the home, the land," he said. "They belong to Amanda. She earned it. Not through blood, but through duty." A medical officer stood next to him, confirming mental clarity and voluntary intent. My throat tightened. I didn't cry, not yet. I just watched, letting every word settle into the cracks this past month had carved open. He looked directly into the camera near the end. "Amanda is the compass now." It was the last thing he said, and it felt like he was saying it to me, not just the record. I sent the footage to my attorney that same afternoon. At the same time, NATO's cyber division finalized their investigation. The email, the audio, all of it traced back to Ryan's company server. Harris Tech, Charleston IP, same VPN signature used on my military breach. I stared at the report, my hands still, my chest calm. For the first time in weeks, I knew it. I had always known. But knowing and proving are two different battles. Now I had both. My grandfather's voice, the system's validation, and a path forward that finally pointed true. As I drove home that evening, I held the compass in my palm, feeling the weight of it settle. Not heavy, just solid. Like truth should be. The courtroom was packed, but no one made a sound. Reporters scribbled quietly. A Navy rep sat in the back, arms crossed, watching every move. I stood in full dress uniform, the compass tucked in my pocket. When my attorney played the video, the room leaned forward. Grandpa's voice filled the space like he was still alive, choosing his words carefully, leaving no room for doubt. Then we submitted NATO's cyber report. IP logs, server traces, the fake email, the deepfake audio. All of it pointed to one source. My brother. Ryan didn't stand. He lurched, pale and shaking. He faced the judge, but his eyes were on me. He didn't deny it. He choked out, "It was the company, Amanda. Harris Tech was collapsing. Dad said if I fixed the will, he'd cover the debt. I didn't mean for any of this. I was drowning. He told me you wouldn't care, that you'd never come back anyway." My father, Richard, didn't move. He simply stared ahead, his betrayal now fully exposed under the harsh courtroom lights. The judge looked at me, then back to Ryan, then to my father. "This court finds in favor of the defendant, Captain Amanda Lewis. All charges are dismissed, with prejudice." The sound of the gavel was soft. But finally, then came her words. This case was never just about a will. It was about integrity. And Captain Lewis, you have upheld that integrity when no one else did. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just nodded once. Outside, the wind had picked up, snapping the flag above the courthouse. No applause, no cameras in my face, just sky, wind, and a name that no longer felt like a question. I had cleared it. Quietly, completely. A month after the verdict, I started full-time at the Veterans Transition Center in Savannah. No medals, no commands. Just a quiet office, donated coffee, and a wall of resumes waiting for a second chance. I helped vets reframe their experience for civilian life. Some had served in places that don't make the news. Others carried stories they couldn't tell outside those walls. I didn't need to prove myself anymore. I just needed to show up. One afternoon, a young Marine named Connor asked me, "Ma'am, what do you do when your own family doesn't believe in you?" I paused before answering. "You stand anyway," I said. "Even if no one claps, you salute life." Later that evening, I drove out to my grandfather's grave. The air was still. I knelt down, placed a small Navy insignia beside his old compass, and whispered, "You were right, Grandpa. I didn't win. The truth did." As I stood to leave, I saw him, my father, standing across the path, hands in his coat pocket. He didn't move, didn't speak, just gave me a slow, deliberate nod. I didn't cry, I didn't wave, I just nodded back. It was the first time he looked at me without judgment. Maybe even with respect. I didn't destroy him. I simply set him free from the expectation that he would ever be the father I needed. I accepted the broken truth, and that meant more than any verdict ever could. The truth didn't need applause. It didn't need headlines. It just needed to be carried, quietly, steadily, like a compass that finally found north.